the most dangerous narcissist, they actually aren't the loudest person in the room. I mean, it's not the explosive temper or the grandiose ego demanding the spotlight.
Right, not the person breaking furniture until you submit.
Exactly. It's the quietest one, the one who calculatedly uses sighs, tears, and a mask of fragility to completely control the emotional center of gravity in a relationship.
And that is exactly what we are breaking down today.
Welcome to the debate. Today, we're opening the door to a deeply disorienting psychological space. We are looking at the hidden world of covert narcissism.
It's a space that is so easily misunderstood, which is honestly exactly what makes it so dangerous. I'm looking at this through the lens of behavioral profiling, and the question we really have to answer today is how we fundamentally understand this behavior.
Right. What is actually driving it at the core?
Exactly. My position is that covert narcissism is a predatory, highly calculated strategy. It's rooted in what we call dark tetrad traits.
The combination of narcissism, psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and everyday sadism.
Yes, and it's weaponized specifically to extract resources, power, and control from unsuspecting, empathetic people.
Well, as a trauma-informed therapist, I approach this from the clinical reality of the victim's experience. I argue that covert narcissism is a profound structural pathology operating through passive aggression.
You see it more as a pathology than a tactic.
I see it as a systematic psychological erosion. It isn't just a strategic game of resource extraction, It completely annihilates the victim's perception of reality.
Well, I come at it from a different way. To really understand the calculated nature of this, we have to look at the empirical data. Researchers talk about a phenotypic split in pathological narcissism.
Right, meaning they look completely different on the outside, even though the core issue is the exact same.
Exactly. For anyone not living in a psychology lab, a phenotypic split just means two different outward appearances stemming from the exact same internal architecture. You have your classic, grandiose narcissist, thick-skinned, arrogant, in your face. Then you have the vulnerable, thin-skinned or covert narcissist.
But underneath that completely different outward appearance, the psychological drive is identical.
They share the same profound self-centeredness, the same interpersonal antagonism, and that same exaggerated sense of entitlement.
Right, but the presentation is inverted.
Completely inverted, the covert narcissist simply masks their grandiosity behind a shy, introverted, or even depressed persona.
Which is so disorienting for the partner.
Oh, absolutely. It's a strategy to evade accountability. They use what researchers call virtuous victim signaling. They deliberately broadcast their suffering while projecting high moral character.
So they aren't genuinely sad or broken in your view?
No, they are exhibiting passive entitlement to exploit empathetic targets for dominance.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. Focusing purely on the calculation or the tactical extraction of resources, it minimizes the catastrophic reality warping effect this have on the victim.
How does it minimize it?
Because the true horror here isn't just the hidden grandiosity. It's how this pathology functions as a slow psychological erosion. It's not just a con job, It's an emotional parasite.
An emotional parasite. Okay, how so?
Well, a parasite needs a specific type of host to survive, right? Covert narcissists specifically target driven, empathetic people.
People who are naturally willing to give.
Exactly. Think about individuals with eldest daughter syndrome. People who were parentified as children and trained early on that receiving love requires constant emotional caretaking.
They have to fix other people's problems.
Yes. The emotional parasite latches on to that exact conditioning. It doesn't just take resources. It fundamentally alters the host's environment. The narcissist forces the victim to walk on eggshells, constantly scanning for threats.
Until the victim internalizes a completely false narrative?
Right, where they genuinely believe they are the abuser.
But we have to look at the mechanics of how they achieve that inversion. It is highly calculated, especially when you look at how they play the ultimate victim. Let's go back to that concept of virtuous victim signaling from Akuk and colleagues' research.
The idea that they construct this foundational narrative, right?
Yes. The foundational narrative is this carefully curated backstory of being perpetually misunderstood, uniquely persecuted, or constantly betrayed by everyone in their past.
Mm-hmm.
And they use this. That's not depression. That's weaponized guilt. They use their supposed trauma as a permanent get-out-of-jail-free card for their own abusive behavior.
It becomes an impenetrable shield.
Exactly. If you confront them about something they did wrong, say lying or crossing a major boundary, they don't defend the action itself. They point to the foundational narrative.
Like, how could you be mad at me? You know how much I've suffered.
Exactly. They do this because the virtuous victim effect is an evolutionary loophole.
Wait, what do you mean by an evolutionary loophole?
Well, as a society, human beings are evolutionarily primed to view victims as highly moral actors. We are socially wired to want to help the underdog.
Right, it naturally triggers our empathy.
It triggers what sociologists call the egalitarian motive. It's our innate desire to redistribute resources, whether that's attention, sympathy, or financial support, to the person who is suffering.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
The covert narcissist knows this. It's a three-player game: the victim, the victimizer, and the audience. By signaling that they are a morally pure victim, they hack human nature to dodge accountability entirely.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. When you say they use this to hack human nature, you're implying a level of conscious, twirling the mustache villainy.
You don't think it's conscious?
I think that ignores the psychological reality of what's actually happening in the living room. What we are really seeing is the deployment of a martyr complex.
You don't think the martyr complex is a conscious tactic?
I think it's a structural pathology that runs so deep they often believe their own performance. Their self-sacrifice is loudly, almost suffocatingly advertised every single time the victim attempts to assert a basic human need.
Give me an example of that.
Let's say a partner asks for something simple, like a bit more communication or help around the house. The covert narcissist doesn't just say no. They collapse into a narrative of, I try so hard, I give everything to this family, my anxiety is killing me, and it's never enough for you.
Which immediately puts the partner on the defensive.
Worse than that, it inflicts a chronic, unbearable self-blame. This is where the emotional parasite analogy really takes hold. The victim's natural empathy is hijacked.
Because they feel genuinely sorry for them.
Yes. They look at this person who appears so deeply fragile and devastated, and they think, I must be asking too much. I must be the selfish one. They stop asserting their own reality because advocating for themselves feels like kicking someone who is already down.
But that shield you're talking about, it isn't just used during major arguments. It bleeds into the mundane daily tasks of living together. Which brings us to the absolutely mind-bending reality of weaponized incompetence and covert micro-insults.
Oh, the silent killers of a relationship.
Precisely. Manufactured helplessness is a perfect example of this predatory control in action. Let's say they leave a chaotic, massive mess in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
When confronted, they just shrug and say, I just didn't know where things go. Or, I'm just so overwhelmed lately, my brain is foggy.
Even though they've lived in the house for 5 years.
Exactly. They know where the plates go. It's a deliberate tactic to force you to take over the physical and emotional labor. It implicitly asserts that their time and peace of mind are more valuable than yours.
And it leaves the victim feeling completely crazy.
Because they pair it with quiet contempt. It's the heavy sighing when you ask them to do something, the subtle eye rolling when your back is turned.
Or the sudden cold shoulder when you walk into a room.
Right. They assert dominance and superiority without leaving any fingerprints. If you try to call them out on a sigh, they have plausible deniability. I'm just tired. Why are you attacking me?
Deep sigh. This is exactly what trips victims up, that exact plausible deniability. Because our cultural script says that abuse is supposed to leave a physical mark, right? It's supposed to be obvious.
Right. A shattered glass, a raised voice, a slammed door.
Exactly. But when the abuse is a heavy sigh or a withdrawal of affection or leaving a mess and claiming anxiety, well, the victim is left fighting shadows.
And that takes a massive toll.
Huge. This passive-aggressive withdrawal forces the victim into a constant neurological state of hypervigilance.
Break that down for me. What does that hypervigilance actually look like day to day?
It looks like tiptoeing through your own life. Because the narcissist's moods are so covert and unpredictable, the victim's brain becomes obsessed with trying to predict the next drop in emotional temperature.
So they're constantly on edge.
They are constantly scanning the narcissist's face, analyzing their tone of voice, monitoring the exact force with which they close a cabinet door.
They're trying to read the weather report before the storm hits.
Yes, but the storm is invisible. That constant state of alert isn't just frustrating or exhausting. Physiologically, it keeps the nervous system stuck in overdrive.
The cortisol levels must be through the roof.
Your body is flooding with cortisol. Over time, that leads to chronic anxiety, dissociation, and severe complex PTSD symptoms. The body literally begins to break down from the stress of anticipating the next micro-insult.
I'm not denying the profound physiological impact that has on the victim's nervous system, but we have to recognize that the covert narcissist is engineering that exact environment on purpose. Look at covert gaslighting and the DARVY sequence.
Okay, let's look at DARV.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that this is merely some unconscious trauma response from the narcissist. Let me tell you why. DARVY, which stands for Deny, Attack, Reverse Victim and Offender, is a masterpiece of tactical evasion.
Coined by psychologist Jennifer Freyd, right?
Yes, it is a highly calculated response to confrontation. Let's walk through it. First, they flatly deny the reality. You bring up a hurtful comment they made yesterday, and they say, "That never happened. You're imagining things."
Completely destabilizing step one.
Then, they attack the victim's credibility. "You're always so paranoid, your memory is terrible, you've always been overly sensitive." And finally, the masterstroke. They reverse the roles of victim and offender. Suddenly, they are the ones crying. "The fact that you are constantly bringing up the past and criticizing my character is emotionally abusive. I can't take this anymore."
It flips the script entirely.
I view Darvo as a Trojan horse. Think about it. They roll this giant wooden display of their own suffering into the middle of the relationship. The victim, being empathetic, lowers their drawbridge and opens the gates to offer comfort.
Oh, wow.
And once those gates are open, the narcissist unloads all their own abusive traits, their blame, and their dark psychology directly into the victim's inner fortress.
Right.
They shift the relational frame so completely that the person who initially raised a legitimate concern ends up apologizing just to keep the peace.
Wait, look at how they use pity in that exact sequence. You're describing Darvo as this brilliant tactical debate strategy. But I need us to look at the neuroscience of a Darvo attack on the victim.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because it is far more than an evasion tactic. It is deeply traumatizing. Imagine a victim with an empathetic or anxious attachment style. They enter that conversation feeling vulnerable, wanting to repair a rupture in the relationship.
Right, they just want to fix things.
When the covert narcissist suddenly flips the script, responding with cold contempt or sudden devastated tears, it instantly triggers the victim's threat detection system. The amygdala, the brain's primal alarm bell, starts firing wildly.
It senses acute danger.
Exactly. And when the amygdala fires that intensely, the prefrontal cortex gets knocked completely offline.
So the logical center of the brain just shuts down?
Yes. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain responsible for logic, memory retention, and holding on to the objective facts of what literally just happened 5 minutes ago.
Oh, I see.
When it goes dark, the victim literally cannot access their own memories to defend themselves in that moment. The confusion is physiological.
Which is exactly why the tactic works so well. It fundamentally disables the opponent.
But it's not an opponent in a game to the victim. It is betrayal trauma. When the person you love, the person you depend on for emotional safety, suddenly rewrites reality and accuses you of being a monster, it induces a state of dissociation.
Because the brain just can't process it.
The brain cannot process the profound betrayal of being systematically gaslit by a safe person. Research by Harsey and Freud shows a direct causal relationship between exposure to Darvo and massive increases in self-blame.
So the victim takes on all the fault.
The victim loses their boundaries entirely. They lose their sense of self. It's psychological annihilation.
And that annihilation serves the covert narcissist's ultimate goal, which is absolute, unquestioned dominance. If the victim has no boundaries and no trust in their own memory, Well, the narcissist has a permanent, reliable source of narcissistic supply.
Meaning they get all the attention, validation, and caretaking they need without ever having to reciprocate.
Exactly. They never have to face their own implicit negative self-image, that deep, unconscious shame they carry. They never have to look at it because they have successfully projected all the badness onto the victim.
The victim carries the shame, while the narcissist gets to remain the virtuous, long-suffering martyr.
It's a highly functional, parasitic adaptation.
It is functional for the pathology, yes. But Dr. Ramani Dahasula points out something brilliant about how this plays out in the real world. She notes that the covert narcissist behaviors are almost always read as virtues by the outside world.
How so? Like, what does that look like?
Think about it. The person who feels things so deeply, who is so sensitive and misunderstood, registers in our culture as someone deserving of care. So the victim becomes entirely isolated.
Right, because nobody sees the abuse.
When the victim finally tries to tell a friend what's happening behind closed doors, the friend says, "But they seem so sweet. They just have a lot of anxiety. You should be more patient with them."
Which perfectly highlights my point about the calculation. The mask works. Their professional and social status, combined with this public performance of fragility, acts as a preemptive defense against accountability.
It's terrifyingly effective.
They craft an image of quiet suffering that is completely airtight. And behind closed doors, they are exquisitely sensitive to feedback. Any gentle criticism is met with such a disproportionate, agonizing reaction that it conditions the victim to just stop speaking up entirely.
It becomes a closed loop of control.
Exactly.
We are definitely converging on that reality. The most dangerous aspect of this dynamic is how completely invisible it is to the outside world.
It really is.
It creates a closed loop of abuse, where the victim's reality is slowly dismantled in the dark, while the abuser is comforted and validated in the light.
Exactly. So to bring it back to my core stance, when we look at the silent treatment, the weaponized incompetence, the Darvo sequence, we are not just looking at the tragedy of a wounded soul.
Right.
We are looking at a calculated, predatory mask of fragility. It is a specific presentation of pathological narcissism, used to deceptively extract resources, evade all accountability, and maintain dominance over empathetic targets.
And from my perspective, while those behaviors absolutely function as control, the essence of covert narcissism is an insidious psychological erosion.
Right.
It exploits a victim's deepest empathy and childhood conditioning, resulting in betrayal trauma. And because this abuse literally rewires the nervous system to constantly expect a threat, traditional talk therapy isn't always enough to heal it.
You need something that addresses the physiological response.
Exactly. Victims require specialized trauma-informed healing modalities like somatic experiencing and EMDR.
EMDR being eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing.
Yes, it helps the brain reprocess traumatic memories so they no longer trigger that intense amygdala response. You literally have to physically teach the body how to turn off that primal threat detection alarm so you can rebuild the shattered self-trust.
But understanding the clinical mechanics behind these subtle behaviors, that is the critical first step out for a target. Recognizing that virtuous victim signaling isn't a sign of a partner needing more love, but a documented manipulation tactic.
It allows a person to step back and stop internalizing the blame.
Absolutely. Victims can protect themselves. And practically, that often starts with the gray rock method.
Right. Break that down for anyone unfamiliar. How does someone actually gray rock?
The gray rock method is exactly what it sounds like. You make yourself as emotionally unappealing and unresponsive as a gray rock. When they launch into a Darvo attack or a passive-aggressive sighing fit, you don't defend yourself, you don't over-explain, you don't offer pity. You give short, neutral answers. Okay, I hear you.
Because when you stop giving them the emotional reaction they're trying to extract, you starve the pathology of its supply.
Exactly. It requires setting firm, unyielding boundaries and refusing to debate your reality with someone committed to misunderstanding you.
There is so much more to explore in the source material regarding the long road to recovering from narcissistic abuse and how these subtle behaviors map onto our cultural blind spots.
Oh, definitely.
But we won't declare a definitive winner today. The truth lies somewhere in the harrowing space between a calculated predation and a profound, tragic pathology. We leave it to you to reflect on the quiet dynamics in your own relationships.
Just remember our starting thought. Abuse isn't always a shattered glass or a raised voice.
Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the room is a perfectly timed sigh.